Hey friends, what's up everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Heath, and after exploring in the most recent live stream the classic 90s progressive house sound, today we're jumping into 2025 and the new school. We're going to be building a modern progressive house track completely from scratch right here in Ableton Live. Think crisp production, contemporary bass lines, and that refined sound that's dominating the scene right now. I'll be sharing every decision, every creative choice, and yes, every dead end along the way. So grab yourself a copy, jump in the chat, and let's create some cutting edge progressive house together. So without further ado, let's get started and have a little preview of what we're making today, and then we can test the audio setup as well. So let's have a little play through this idea here. Nice. So there's a little preview of what we're up to today. We're going to be making this kind of style of progressive house. Of course, we're not going to be leaving things like this. That would be cheating. It's not how we do things on the channel here. We like to set the challenge of doing it from scratch. So let's fire up a brand new live set. And hopefully already the microphone levels are good and the music levels are also good. Do let me know if you're already here in the stream. If someone could just give me a thumbs up or something on that, that's always helpful. So why did I mention modern progressive house? I mean, we could label, I could, label a particular artist that makes modern progressive house, or I could label a certain record label. I guess we've got to start a little bit with the last live stream I did, which was 90s progressive house. And this seems like a good place to do a little bit of a comparison. Where has the journey gone since the 90s? You know, what is the differences between the 90s kind of style progressive house, longer tracks, analog style sounds, less precise, less refinement, a little bit more humanized, a little bit more kind of, less DAW, often a lot of machines. So there's a few of the differences. So as we go along through today's stream, we'll look into that a little bit. And of course, don't forget to put your questions in the chat. If you have any, let me know your favorite progressive house artists this year and all time, if you like. And I think if I am going to put a label today a bit on the sound without, as I said, I like to do things also here where we're not just making GMJ and Matter or the Guy J. There are lots of videos on YouTube where people recreate those artists, and those are amazing artists, by the way. I think what I try and emphasize a little bit is that we try and find our own style that fits into progressive house. So maybe something for Arjuna Beats would be a really nice idea, perhaps something that we could say would be a demo that we might end up sending to that label if it turned out like a good idea. So let's go with 128 BPM as our tempo. Let's have a bit of an interesting key here. Ohms 92, hello, very nice hello to you. Thanks for joining the stream. So we're going to have 128 BPM. Let's have a key like F sharp, G flat minor. Why this key? It's a bit of an interesting one. If we turn on our scale, we've got 3 black keys in it. So, first of all, minor for a little bit of emotion and feeling, a little bit on the melancholic kind of hopeful vibe. And then also an interesting scale that mixes white keys with black keys, so we get some nice kind of combinations there. So let's now then fire up a few ideas. I think I might start with, for example, the bass line today. We could begin with anything, and we also might just choose a kick drum as well, so we can have a little bit of a kick. So let's look for a kick sample I think we'll have today. Let's filter it down into kicks. Let's go through here to our friends from PML who do some great sample packs. These ones I've used many, many times over the years, as they've made some excellent one-shots. We don't have to get too fussy just yet. There's one I've bookmarked there, so let's say I use that to get started, and we can swap that very quickly in a bit. So let's have just a simple 4 on the floor kick pattern. We'll put it on C3 just to get us rolling there, nice and easy. Let's bring down the volume a little bit. Great. Then over here to a bass line, we're going to make our sounds from scratch here as well, so we're not going to be using kind of presets, so to speak. We're going to use the default instances of Ableton Live 12 instruments, and then we're going to turn them into the sounds we like. So hopefully you can learn something along the way there about doing that as well. It's not as difficult as sometimes people think it is, and also instead of sifting through lots of presets, that can take a lot of time. While I sift through all of these looking for what I'm looking for, I might be a lot quicker actually just literally loading up the synth and going straight in. So maybe wavetable or drift for the bass. Either of those could be good. Let's maybe say a wavetable, and let's say we start with sort of, we're going to end up with a blended tone in a moment, but let's say we start with a bit of a sawtooth. And then I'm thinking about 8 bars. So let's have a nice long bass line that evolves. So we can do that in a moment actually. So what we'll do is we'll just loop up the first bar and then we'll spread it out once we get a pattern going. So I'm thinking sort of a rolling bass, but at the same time a little bit different. So let's have offbeats for the first couple, and then this sort of beat here, and then another offbeat. So a typical offbeat bass might just be like this. Obviously it's very high, by the way. We're going to shift that down in a bit. What we're going to do is add a note there and bring down this one in velocity. And then we'll bounce that down a bit. And then let's go into our key today. And then what we'll do is we'll just come back to this and then duplicate it out a bit. And I'm going to stay in scale here. So if you want me to keep it in scale, we can turn this on, right? And therefore we can see all the notes. But what I'm sort of doing here is I'm putting one of these extra groove bass notes up an octave. And then I'm sort of working between the octave, just listening to the tone of, you know, different tones within the same scale, right? So I think it's good to pick a key and a scale. That's what we're doing here. And we'll try and work within that. I like the E, which is the 7. D is nice for a bit more moody. That's a 6. 5 on the C sharp. 4. 3. So remembering we're going to stretch this out to 8 bars. So we've now got 4 here. So let's make this a bit of a progression. And let's maybe lift our bass up to the 3rd then, which is this A that I've chosen here. So do we lift it there or do we lift it here? Sounds better. Okay, great. So we're sort of following a little bit of a progression here with the bass line. So let's do another duplicate. And then in this next one, we're not going to come back down to the F, which is our root of this scale. Let's go somewhere else. So let's say that we maybe look at here, and then we come up maybe all the way up to here, to the C. So all notes in the scale. And we kind of, I'll show you in a second, the secret of, or it's not secret, but what's kind of also happening here. again, we don't want quite that. Might just have one note in the between there, and we might not at all, but let's see. Just feeling it out. Okay, so the movement I'm quite liking. Maybe this one I'm going to try one semitone down and the G sharp. Trying something out here. Okay. Okay, I think that's not bad there. So what we could maybe do is follow this little motif we've got here and also try that a little bit up here. So by that we could kind of introduce the next note or another little note in here, but let's just see what that sounds like. Stops it from being quite so a bit boring. So that could be nice, and that could be something that could happen along the way. It could be a change that could happen in a variation of this. I think I'll put it back down here, and now let's work a little bit on the sound itself. But what I wanted to sort of say earlier, the thing that's sort of going on here, which let's sort of do it this way. We'll just create a few notes over here. I basically bring this down. And if you look at what's kind of going on, we're kind of building a chord, right? So if I'd left these notes up here, it would be a triad with an extra, it's actually a fourth chord. So it would be a triad with the seventh on the top. So literally, if you're trying to build a bass line that sort of moves through this progression, you might have started with a chord and then sort of broken it into the pieces, which is what I've kind of done here, by the way, but I sort of did it without sort of showing you that first. So we kind of have a chords broken up into this little progression, apart from this one here, which is a little bit of, instead of just playing the third of the triad, I've added the second for a little bit of spice. So actually we're using all those notes. We're using 4 notes of that chord broken up, and then we're also adding this one in here, right? Which adds, again, a little bit more flavor. So I just thought to show you that. There'll be a bit of a theme here. So something you can do is pick a favorite chord to start with, make a chord, make a really nice chord that you like the sound of, and then you can start breaking it up and using it in lots of different ways. For example, breaking it up and turning it into a rhythm and then turning it into a bass line. And if we put this up here, sounds fine. But it's just a little bit more spicy with that second in there as well of the scale. Okay, so let's go to the synth. So we could have it low down like that. I think part of modern progressive is we're going to have like this as a bit of a mid bass, and then we can have a lower bass as well that we layer with this. So this isn't going to do any of the sub work, right? So let's make that sub bass. So let's take the same pattern. So let's group our wavetable, pop over into the chains, and let's grab an operator, drop that in. An operator is really nice for a clean sort of sine wave on the bottom here. So we're going to leave it in sine, and we're going to have that sitting underneath the wavetable. And if we need some harmonics to it, we can always change it a bit to a triangle. Or we can add a little bit of harmonics with some effects. So we could pop over, actually one that I quite like on basses, believe it or not, is the vinyl distortion. And just a little bit of that, just to add some harmonics to this pure sine that we've got here, which is sitting. Yeah, I don't want too much tone from that, so if there's a bit too much tone from the vinyl distortion, another way we could do this, there's quite a lot of ways we could do this, adding harmonics. Let's just use a bit of raw on the low. So again, just to bring out a little bit more character. And if we want any crunch, more harmonics. Not as much as that. Just a soft sine's fine. So a little bit of saturation on there just to get our sub working a bit. Okay, basic bass. All right, let's move on to the melody, or getting something going in that department. So let's say that we know we're in this key and scale of F sharp or G flat minor. these are the notes we're working with here. So let's carry on with that theme that I was talking about a little bit before, a chord. So this would be the triad chord 1 of the scale, right? So if we were to sort of break that chord up, and back in the day before we had some of the tools we do now, what we used to do is kind of do that, make the chord and then pop it outside of the piano roll so you can kind of see the notes that you might be working with. And then what we could start doing is, turning that into a bit of an arp and then copying that arp across, and we're just again breaking up a chord. Now if we want the chord to be a little bit more, we could have those 4 notes the same as we're working with the bass, or we're actually working with those 4 notes in the bass line, right? So we could make an arp around that. We could also use octaves. So we've got the F#3 here. Another nice touch to add to this without going crazy is to also add the octave. So now you've got this chord basically here, and you're using those 4 notes. So you've got the octave F# plus the 2 notes in between, and this one as well if you like, and you can turn those into your own arpeggio. Patrick Stout, good to see you live. Great to see you in the chat here. Dr. Bones, welcome back. Welcome back to you as well. Cheeky, but yes, it's true. I've been absent for a little bit, but here we are again. So let's have that little arp, and let's copy it across. And let's keep it sort of moving across. I don't know about the rhythm just yet, but we'll find out in a second what kind of rhythm we're going to keep here. Maybe what we'll do is we'll just start with a short loop again, and then we'll extend it once we get rolling here. Okay. Well, let's have another wavetable. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to play around with this a bit in timing. So I'm just trying to match up how that would end over here and restart again, right? Okay, now let's try something a little bit different here as well. So if we duplicate that wavetable clip down of this little arp that we've sort of plugged in here. Now, there's lots of things going back to our chord, right, on the side here. Again, we can spice things up a little bit. So maybe in the second bar here, we could follow the bass line as well, if we like. So we could go back over to the bass. And another little trick you can do an Ableton, you can hold down Shift, and then you can have the 2 offset, so we can see what's kind of going on between the bass and these. Obviously they're not the same length at the moment, so if we were to make that another duplicate, and now we do the shift trick, we're laying the patterns over each other, right, just like so. So we can kind of see that we're going up and then sort of coming back down. So potentially what we could do is do a bit of following of that inside of the clip here, and move some of the notes in the arp around a little bit. So perhaps we come down here where it goes up in the other. So let's have a listen in context. Yeah, I don't like that. So that's, I see probably why, because I've missed the note outside of the scale. So if we put this on, we can kind of see that went a bit wrong there. So we'll just undo that. And we'll come back. So our options actually wouldn't be going down because we're already using the second there. So we could come up here, perhaps, into this space. And then here, maybe what we'll do is go up to the octave. Yeah, I don't want too much of that. I actually just kind of quite like, this is a new chord though as well here. So with the bass, we now know we're all in key and scale, but we've got a little bit of movement that kind of, we're talking about sort of harmonies here and movement, what's going on. We're not exactly copying this. We could have built our arpeggio here on top of the bass, which is another thing. I think we'll build our chords later using the bass pattern, but essentially, if we zoom in here, we've got some separation. Sometimes the notes are harmonizing together. We know we're in the same key and scale. So if we're playing an F3 up here, we're playing an F1 down here. And so if we're playing an A here, let's just make sure that's right. So yeah, we're playing the A there, we're playing the A up here, right? Or we're playing actually the C sharp on top of the A. So it's all working musically. Sometimes you might want it very much that it copies that feeling and movement. As I said, with the chords, I think will work that the chords in this track do pay attention to this movement of the bass, but the melody is a bit of a free spirit at the moment, but staying inside. And again, it's a chord, this chord of 4 notes broken up into an arpeggio, right? So now let's try a couple of things out about how this is going to sound. First of all, I would like some velocity randomization to it. So I'm going to do that down here. Okay, and I'm going to delete that one I copied before because I've made some changes, and I'm going to copy it down now just so we've preserved that. Okay, so what we've got so far. And then what I'm going to do here is, let's just look at the synth for a second. So let's look at the difference here if we keep the synth polyphonic up here versus if we turn it into monophonic. It sounds a lot thinner, right? But the thing I'm thinking to do here is make this a bit unique, a bit original by going into monophonic, because that's going to allow me to use the glide here in a second. So bear with me, because if I leave it in polyphonic, I think this pattern as it is works quite well, but it's still very simple. It's a nice arpeggio. It doesn't have any note length changes, nothing that sort of makes it, apart from the sort of note changes, pitch changes, if you like. There's not much else special about it. But what I'm thinking to do is grab all of this in, let's do it in this clip. Let's give it a new color. So in this one here, what I'm thinking to do is grab all of these. Let's make them legato. Just undo that. Could do it manually. I'm just going to drag them so that they're overlapping over each other like so. So pretty much I think almost all are overlapping. We might need to adjust this little one up here. And now if I turn it to mono, I can start using glide. Right, which is a nice unique kind of sound in its sense, in itself. So the idea here is to make them overlap, and that can bring in then the gliding between the notes, whereas if we play here, it's a different sound, right? And the glide is out of action. So same synth, I'm moving the glides, but in polyphonic I'm getting no glides. If I turn it to mono, the glide still isn't working. So if you're wanting to use that and you're wondering why that's not working, the tip is going to be that if you're wanting to glide between the notes, you want to get them so that they're going to overlap. So we get this gliding from up to the notes and down to the notes. So it changes this arpeggio quite a lot into a new sound, really, with the pattern overlapping. So I'm going to use a bit of glide like this to get it a bit more interesting. And then let's look for some different sort of sounds to this wavetable as well. Okay, not noise just yet. Maybe this one. And let's layer this oscillator one with some noise. That's nice. Almost sounds like it's got a little hi-hat on top of it. Tough choices. Make the helicopter. So that glide has just turned that synth into something completely different. So we've overlapped the notes deliberately in this pattern of the art we've created. Let's have a listen to this up or down an octave. So by the way, I'm going to take away our chord outside the piano roll. That was to just show you that this is effectively a chord broken up. Okay, let's try it down an octave. Too low, okay. Okay, let's process that a little bit. You know, sometimes when you're working on things like this, when you're working on making the music and then you're working on the sounds themselves, you have to be a little bit patient. It's not going to sound perhaps the killer sound straight off the bat. You know, these things take a little bit of time, but it's worth working on them and worth kind of learning how to turn these instruments into your own sounds, because then you've got something that's yours out of the box rather than something that everyone else has access to. So something else we're going to do to our ARP here before we get more processed, I'd like some little surprises as well. So this is nice. We've got some changes in the pattern, and we can add more, changing the notes around and the pitch around. But I'd like a little bit of something that's kind of happening a little bit by itself, but it's changing that. So my idea here is to go to the MIDI effects. Let's grab random. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of random to these notes. So as these notes come into the wavetable, we're going to set it up so it's pretty low. Chance is going to be low. Let's start with something like 20% chance of the pitch being changed. And if we leave note sync off, that is, we're working in this key of F sharp or G flat minor, pitches are going to be all over the place. They're going to be chaotic. They're going to be outside of our scale. Might sound amazing every now and then, but it might also sound really awful. So what we can do is put it in scale. We can also limit the choices. Maybe we don't want 12 possible chances of the pitch being changed. Maybe we just want a few notes that it might access when it changes the pitches, and it's randomly going to do that with a low percentage. And then I'm going to change it to bidirectional. So it's not just going to add new pitches sometimes, it's going to add or below, add pitches below. So let's have a listen to that. So this is not note synced. So some of those pitches aren't in key, but if we note sync it, we'll keep scale sync it to our scale. Nice. So we get a little variations. Now, if that's too much, we can tone that down even further. And limit our choices. So if I have more choices, versus less choices. And now you probably can understand why I went for glide. So why did I choose monophonic? Why did I put it in glide? It's giving me this really nice edge to this whole wavetable that's made it its own direction and stuff. Capers, good afternoon to you, or good morning to you. Brooklyn, NYC. Hope you're well, my friends. Good to see you in the stream. As is Olms92, Dr. Bones, and Patrick Stout. And if you are in the stream with me, do feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Let's crack on here. So the next thing I'd like here is quite an aggressive sidechain. Yes, sorry, Capers, I realized once I reread it that it was definitely morning for you. It's afternoon here in Ibiza, and not sunny Ibiza today. It's a bit kind of grey, windy and cloudy here. Anyway, I hope you're enjoying your Sunday. Fire up a coffee if it's morning time, and let's keep on keeping on here. So I heard something there that I was thinking to do, and it's a compressor. So let's get already a sidechain compressor in the mix here. So let's have the glue. Let's actually use one of the presets in here, but we'll modify it. So I quite like this gentle 2-pass sidechain here. So let's have that. Post reverb, and we're going to set this up to sidechain to the kick that we're working with. We might have the EQ on, or filter. Let's put it in bandpass. We'll check that in a second. And then we're going to pump this wavetable's tail and reverb. So I'm playing around with the wavetable a bit here on the modern warp and fold and get maybe a little bit more sound out of there. Or FM. What do you prefer, FM or modern? Classic, could do pulse width as well. Personally, I'm drawn between either modern and a little bit of warp. So let me know in the chat there if you've got a preference. Let's go with, I'm just going to dial in something and then we can always change it. So over to the matrix. And let's have a slow LFO, move that. If I turn off the random, by the way, listen to what the random MIDI effect's doing. So we've got a nice arpeggio, but this is just giving it some nice little pitch changes. And if we don't want bidirectional, by the way, we can go to add and it will just do that. Sidechain's working nicely there. Okay, maybe a little bit of delay just to top off this sound for the moment, then we're going to move on. Okay, so we're cooking, we're getting into it, into the flow here. So let's try sticking with the same kind of sample library. Let's now go with a clap, and maybe something kind of a bit more organic-ish. So let's have a listen while we're... Nice, really deep bass. Hope you can hear that, ladies and gents. Let's try the vinyl distortion again, but on the wavetable this time. See what other clap sounds we've got here. Would I layer the clap? That's a good question from Capers. Maybe. Don't have to. I mean, I like to try and always pick the main sound, the one sound that I'd like. If I can find it in one sound, then there's no need to layer it. If I can't find what I'm looking for, then yes, layering could be a good option to thicken it up. Maybe you're looking for a different characteristic that you can't find. So obviously, yes, layering is an option, but sometimes you know, a lot of people layer for the sake of layering rather than really kind of for the sake of what it's bringing to the table. So actually what I want to do, I love this feature at Ableton, by the way, is, you know, the sound similarity search. So I wanted to actually just flick through this clap while it's playing and see what else Ableton offers. So I can do that over here. For example, I might prefer this one. And if you change your mind, you can go all the way back. We'll just stay with that. It's nice and tight. Pitch it down maybe a little bit. Just put an EQ on this. Help the bass line a bit. Let's have another drum sound just for a little bit of context so we can build up a bit of groove here as well. Shift things around a bit and then we'll crack on with the melodic stuff. So let's have a bit of some offbeat shaker type action. So let's say we pop over here. By the way, do feel free to add any questions you might have in the chat as we go along here. If there's anything you want to know about modern progressive house or anything else to do with Ableton Live, feel free to drop it in the chat. So we're going to switch off claps and let's go to perk. So I think the shakers will be under perk, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Making a few little adjustments here and there just with what we have. Let's see what frequency this kick is in. We might tune it a little bit. If we don't see it on the tuner, which we don't, surprises there, let's use an EQ. So it's a G0 more or less. So maybe we'll just go up one semitone. Make it a G sharp, which is in our scale. We can also do this similar to the clap. Flick through a few suggestions. Some good ones here. I think this one punches through what we've got so far a little bit better. Just removing a little bit of boxiness here. Capers, I prefer a more pronounced kick because of my hip hop roots. Yeah, more pronounced kick, well, something that cuts through the mix nicely, right? It's always a good idea. Just going to try one thing with this bass line here, then we're going to move on because I've got the wavetable on it, but I'm just going to try a drift bass in here. Pattern's fine. Just not sure on the sound just yet, so let's add a drift in here. Yeah, I might prefer the character of drift, I think, for the bass. Yeah, I think that's a good change there. Drift bass instead of wavetable. Okay, next up, let's have another MIDI track. Let's get a little bit more music in here. Let's get some harmonies. We don't need that clip anymore. The cool thing about what we're doing here is this arpeggio, but we've got glide on the wavetable, which we overlap the notes. We drew them in, but then we made sure they overlapped. That brought glide in, so we've got this kind of gliding arpeggio. It has a little bit of a random MIDI effect to add some extra pitches and a little bit of processing without processing. Okay, let's have our little chord trick again. So we're going to have another chord as the starting point. Our root triad. So we're going to try a bit of spectral resonator on this. Maybe try one of the other chords in the scale. So if we take away the spectral resonator, adds a nice little bit of character. So in answer to Caper's question earlier, I might layer this clap. This might not be the final clap, right? I like to get moving and I like to have a clap here, but you know, choosing the final sample in a live stream like this, a little bit tricky. It's best just to get the ideas down and then those sort of samples can be swapped really easy, but it is maybe a bit thin and might need some layering or a different clap perhaps. So let's do a little bit of labeling here while we're catching up on what things sound like. So we know what's what. Otherwise things can get pretty confusing pretty fast. Healthy work, cleaning things up a bit. Arpeggio. This is more this little kind of chord fill. So what are we going to call that? Just the metal or just a motif, I think we'll do. So, you know, again, looking at chords, right, breaking them up into, turning them into little sequences, turning them into bass lines, it's all kind of happening here, where we're using literally, as I said, nice little exercise you can do, pick one chord or make a really nice chord at the very start, and then kind of try and see how far you can get with that, breaking it into bass lines, melodies, arpeggios, and all that good stuff. And you might find that just one chord takes you all the way to a really nice musical idea. What do you think? Are we kind of going in the Anjuna Deep kind of vibes here? Let me know in the chat. Do you like Anjuna Deep? Is that kind of a sound you're into? What are your thoughts there? Okay, so let's maybe try another little bit of a groove element, something percussion sort of style, but not just any percussion, I think. Something again with a little bit of interest to it. And again, for me, the main thing that separates this from lots of other ideas and decisions is mainly the synth sound design, right? The choice of that glide really makes this lead kind or this arp interesting, and it's just little things like that. If we take that out, it kind of sounds like not vanilla, but like something we have heard quite a lot. So that, you know, and making your sounds from scratch. Okay, so I'm looking for some kind of interesting sample of some sort. Yeah, maybe. Saw blades. That's something that, yeah, see that could be interesting. Something we can turn into like a melodic perk. So we could bring our chord back in again, or again another chord. This is the root triad. Let's try chord 2. So if we do this. Get the rhythm right first. So something we should have done before we launched into this melody, actually. Let's just stop that for a second. Let's just see, because I have a feeling this sample is going to change anyway. But let's just see what happens when we pop a tuner on it. And we just turn off scale for a second, drop in a C3 legato. Collision would also be a good thing for this, by the way. So there we go. So we can kind of see the note, and is an A or a D in our scale. Check that in a moment, but we need to get it in the green. So let's bring it up. There's definitely an A, but I don't think there's a D sharp in our scale. So if we need to check that, we can go to any of these music clips, pop on scale and have a look. So we're working with a D or an A, no D sharp or no A sharp, essentially, or A flat. So coming back here, I'm just kind of tuning that so that if I play a C, right now I'm not getting a C, but now I'm getting a C, right? Okay, let's try and find a root. So if we were to flick through that sample, we'd be messing up the tuning a bit of this kind of metal sound, but it just gives us a different percussion sound, right? It's just not something that we've heard thousands of times before. And as I said, it does sound a bit like Collision, but we can kind of take it many different directions, really, and give it sort of a little bit of character and flavor to it. I'm also curious to see what happens if we glitch this up a little bit. Sometimes it's good almost to have a rule of how long you're going to work on a sound before it gets binned, or you carry on. This one's sort of on the limit. The idea of the percussion being something other than a standard percussion, you know, by that I mean cowbells and claves and bongos and things, is definitely something I would stick with. But just this particular one that I've kind of gone to the trouble of tuning it and all that kind of thing, I'm thinking that I might swap it to something else. But again, yeah, it's okay for now. Let's try a bit of grain delay on it. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to try flicking a few samples here. We can retune it. That's better already. Okay, so let's see what have we got on the tune in for this one. It's showing G sharp, which is in our scale. So let's roll with that. Okay, so we had a sidechain compressor before in action that's already set up. So let's get that over onto here as well. Don't be, as a little tip as well, when you've got lots of effects and you're doing some processing, don't be afraid to switch around the order. Use your ears to tell you whether, you know, this sounds better with the panning before the delay, or the delay before the panning, or the compressor at the very end, or the compressor at the very beginning. Because if I put the compressor at the very beginning here, the sidechain is happening before the processing to the kick, and if I put it here, all the processing's included and then being sidechained. So it depends on the result you're looking for. I kind of quite like the sidechain pumping the dry sound going into all of this, right? So often I'll do this and then I'll move things around. And again, maybe that filter's really at the very end, or it's a little bit for the panning, and the panning shifts everything around after the filter. Okay. Could have a sequence like that, just wanted to try that out. think for now we'll just use it like this. Maybe change the timing there. Yeah, somewhere in here maybe. Maybe something like that. Just gonna have a quick look in the chat here. Capers, great lesson, have to run, but I'll watch the replay. Thank you for sharing your music. You're very welcome, Capers. Great to have you with me in the stream here. I have to try to share my process too. Cool. Yes, always a good thing to do. Okay, I think it's time for some chord action. So if you weren't in the stream earlier, from the very beginning, we kind of started with this bass and we built up a little bit of a pattern. It's mainly offbeat, an offbeat bass line. You could sort of say rolling a little bit, but we added this little extra sort of ghosty groove note, and then we turned it into this kind of progression, which sometimes you might start with the chords and this might follow the bottom of the chord progression, but we've kind of gone with the bass first, and then we built a arpeggio out of that chord, or a chord again that fits in the scale. We've broken it up, just literally grabbed our chord and then broken it into an arp, and written a pattern to do with that, which changes around a little bit. So what I'm thinking to do is grab the bass, copy that over to here, and what we're going to do is kind of follow the bass a bit. So what we can do is actually just really thinking to leave this here as well, so I'll just option drag some things. So what are we on the F1 here? So let's go up to F2. Option drag, please. Okay, and we're going to scrap all of that, nudge this one over to here and drag that out. So we're going to kind of follow what happens there, but we might not follow exactly where the notes change, but we're going to follow the movement, let's say, to start with, and see how we get on as the basis of some chords in a moment, right? So we're using the bass line's movement to influence the chords movements. Match those up, see how we get on. Again, lost the option there. Sure, some of the rest of you have those struggles. It's one of those fun ones. If you don't quite catch it, yeah, I've done it twice now. Let's say if I get it right this time, hopefully. Otherwise, I should just copy and paste, right? Okay, done. Copy and paste it is then. Oh, hang on, that didn't work either, so I didn't quite get it. Stubborn that I am. Wow. Must be something going wrong there with the keyboard. Doesn't like that. One more time. Come on, give it to me. There we go. Finally. Okay, reset. Another one here. Wish me luck. Yes. Okay, cool. All right, so now we're going to kind of just use the structure of that. Might seem like a lot of effort for not a lot of result, but yeah, sometimes we do that. Okay, something like that perhaps. Let's make all these change. Where they change, we'll listen in a bit and see about what changes where, but we can kind of maybe have something like that. All of these down here, they're going to be muted, but we're sort of following the movement of the bass. And what can be really nice, I'll show you in a second. I'll leave it as it is, and then we'll have a play. So let's change the color of that, and let's grab something like some strings. Could be nice here. We're going sort of Anjuna style, so let's see about some strings. I think I might just search for it with search engine. Okay, that's why, because we don't want that anymore. We want an instrument. This guy. Okay. This is, so who can hear that that's out of tune? Very clearly that is not in the A that it should be, and that should sound a lot better now. And then, as I said, we can fine tune where the changes of the chords are. I think maybe like that. So let's maybe change this clap, something more dynamic than what we've got. Let's clear up there and get into here. No, also not that one. Okay, so let's go back on that. Try it another way. Just finessing the clap, but it's bothering my ears for a second. So just going to see if I can find one that I prefer. Caper's thought about layering it. It could be one for layering what I'm using, but I think we'll just look for a bit better sample, to be honest. Let's filter this as well down so we can get there a little bit more efficiently. Okay, let's go through these a bit. Okay, so we are with the strings. I kind of like what's happening there. We're following the bass right down here. We're kind of following it. You don't have to copy it exactly, but we're following the movement. So what could be nice sometimes is to try something a little bit different. So we've built the bottom of the chords from the bass line, as I said, so don't ever be shy about that. You can always reverse around the whole process, that you start with the bass line and the chords come from the bass line, or you can write the chords first and the bass line can come from the chords. I'm sure you're understanding what I mean. So let's grab the notes here. Let's duplicate this clip on the strings, and on the duplicate here, let's invert it. So it's going to go the opposite way to the bass on this one, and see what that sounds like. Nice. There we go. So now we've got variation of those. We can play following the bass. But for me, the inversion works really nicely. I like the mood, the feeling that comes from that. So this could be used in a break somewhere. But it's all about the inversion for me. I've also taken out the Chameleon bell perk for the moment. I'm not sure this works now. No. So I think we can do something a lot better with this. We'll come back to that. It's one of those ones that hasn't worked out so far. Okay, so we've got our side chain that we've been working with. Let's get that on these strings to get some nice movement into it. They're not yet chords, right? They're just like a drone. So let's see. We've started on the C. Do that again. And now what we could do, a nice way to make chords here using some of Ableton's tools. So we can do what I did, basically just I option dragged the same pattern and put it up an octave higher. But let's say we start a bit different to that. We go and select all the notes. And then what you can actually do up here, it's quite a nice way to build chords, is we can add intervals up here. So basically it's going to do the lifting for us, because if we add intervals here, it's in scale degrees. So if I put 1 scale degree, you see that it chooses the next degree up in the scale. And if I go to 3, or 2 should I say, it moves to the 3rd. Up here, 3 scale degrees. So it's not semitones, it's moving the scale degrees. So I could have just put 12 there and I get my octave up, right? Well, sorry, actually that's 12 scale degrees. It's just 7 scale degrees and I'm back up here. So that's a nice way to work actually, because you can start filling in these chords a little bit differently, playing around with that. So if we go back to what we just had, which is this, I can now do down scale degrees as well. So let's maybe start with this one. going to go from moody. I'm going to try below. So I really love that feature. Don't sleep on that one. It's a really nice way to build out your chords because you're moving around inside or adding to the chord, and you're keeping things in scale by using the add interval with the scale degree. So I think that's sounding really nice. Let's see how low we're going to keep these. Maybe we go up. Just working on the bass a little bit, just kind of elevating its sound a little bit. So something else we can try here with the strings. Let's copy it down. So we've got this nice pattern now. Let's try something like, I'm using the side chain to get some movement to it, and this definitely work on these strings, like make them really beautiful, luscious and sweeping around. But something we can try in this duplicate clip here is a bit of a dead mouse kind of style idea here. Let's go and make our grid a bit bigger, maybe quarter notes, and then let's slice the chords up a bit into quarter notes. So we would get this, like a re-triggering. So we're getting that chop. So a big difference, right? Here, really static, perfect for a break. So maybe in the track, in the groove, if we use the strings, maybe a bit softer attack. Because we get almost like a little click. So I can smooth that out a bit. But the re-triggering of the notes is kind of interesting when you add it with the groove. A little bit harsh up there. A little bit more percussion. See if we can have a fast hi-hat in here as well. Okay, let's make these hi-hats a little bit prettier. They're very robotic at the moment. There's a reason for that, so let's humanize them a bit. Could use some swing, but I think we'll just do that kind of the old school manual style. And let's have a little bit of LFO action on what I'm doing here with the decay, just to get it to open and close a bit. Could be interesting. Keeps him a little bit interesting. It's just got a little bit more about it. It's just adding a little bit of LFO here to the decay, so it's opening and closing out the decay, and we've got a lot of adjustment there. We can still keep things in mod mode on the LFO, so we can still adjust the position of the decay, and we're just opening and closing that gradually around that point, which you can see just opening and closing a little bit. So if we want more of that, we can get more out of it. Maybe a bit of erosion on the actual sound. All right, so it goes from this really kind of sharp, not all that interesting sound, something a lot more interesting. Bit of housekeeping. Also want to kind of push this a bit. Yeah, maybe we can make this a little bit darker perhaps. bit too dominant. Let's see, one last little touch here, see if we can add maybe an operator. Where are you, operator? Maybe something like that. Think about an idea of a little bit of a bass stab type of. Doesn't have to come in too often though. shorter. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a mini jam here as we wrap things up for today's stream. If you've got any questions that you are dying to ask, please do drop them in the chat there. Where we began with this bass line pattern today, which is just following our scale really. It's going from the root notes, the F sharp that we're in today. We're in F sharp or G flat minor. We jump from the root up to the second note of the scale. We've added some little fill notes in here. It's an offbeat sort of bass line with a nice little ghost note in there. And we use the bass to kind of make a progression. So we started with this movement. And we played around with that. Added our kick to it. And we started with that conversation, and then we went and worked on this arpeggio, which kind of started as a traditional chord broken up, which I've put on the side of the piano roll here. And then what I did to make it a bit different was I kind of, again, like the bass, kind of made some movement between different chords in the arp. But what we ended up doing, which I think makes this lead really interesting, is we made the notes overlap, which brought into play then on the wavetable the fact that we can make it monophonic and then bring the glide in. So we're gliding up and down between the different notes there. So that's what happened next, which gives us that feeling. And then we've just been adding some other drum sounds. We've made a few changes along the way, but new clap, little shaker pattern. And then I've just been adding some extra little bits as we've gone along here. So the next thing we really did here was added these chords and the strings, and we've got them sustained here, and then I've also sliced them up into quarter notes. So we've got a couple of options. They can play like this with the nice rhythm of the track, or in a break. Another closed hi-hat, fast one. And then this new little idea of this operator bass stab. That needs some work. And I forgot, we've also got this other chord broken up to give us that nice little interlude piece. So I can imagine this breaking right down. Something like that, so that doesn't happen so much, and then we can build the track back up. And there's lots of automation to happen here. I need a filter on this actually. And those strings. So there you go, 2 hours, that's what we have. That is an introduction to modern progressive. If you wondered why I labeled the video Modern Progressive House, I'm not a huge fan of labeling it after other artists, as there are many videos out there telling you how you should make your track and make it sound like Guy J or GMJ and Matter and all those amazing producers. Well, I'm not those guys. They are their sound. They've nailed their sound as great as it is. So I always like to try and do something that fits in that genre. And I'd love to think that maybe this could be a polished demo and something that could go towards Anjuna as a label, something like that. So we're in that area, but we're kind of personalizing it, which if you're working with me as an artist, I coach artists, that would be something we'd be working on, is making your own style and your own sound, which, yeah, as I said, you know, there's a lot of people out there talking about just copy this other artist and you'll get there a lot quicker doing that. Well, you might, but you'll also end up being another clone of that artist. And I can tell you from experience, the A&Rs of those bigger labels, they're listening for you to sound like you will fit in the label but not sound like somebody else, because they already have that artist signed. So just a couple little tips there. So on that note, by the way, I mentioned coaching. If you want to sort of take this, you know, thing called music production further and develop your techniques, you know, specific to your own music and your own sounds, I work one-to-one with artists, DJs, producers on exactly this stuff. So there's a link down below in the description to book a free call with me if you fancy that, and we'll figure out if we're a good fit and we can map out what your signature sound is and how that could look. No pressure, just a conversation. So I thought I might add that as well. As always, big help to the channel is push those buttons. I don't need to tell you which ones. They help the channel a lot and help other people to see the video and help them out as well to make better electronic music. So on that note, join me again soon. There'll be for sure another video soon on the channel, a tutorial, 25-minute one. And then we'll be back in a live stream very soon. Share it with your friends, drop a comment. If there's something else you'd like to see soon, let me know. Great to have you all on board. Big thanks to Olms, Dr. Bones, Patrick Stout, Capers. And if you're watching this back on replay, I hope you find the video beneficial and enjoy the video. Keep on creating, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your weekend, Sunday, and I'll see you all very soon for another video all about electronic music, maybe modern progressive, maybe Anjuna. Let me know. Take care, everybody. Ciao for now. Over and out. Bye.